And welcome to another edition of Live from the Heartland. I'm Lisa Smith. Today our first guests are experts on Loyola University history. Ellen Skerrett is the author and an independent scholar. She has just completed the book Born in Chicago, which is a history of Loyola University, and we think it's because the 100-year landmark, but we'll get into that later. And we also have Dr. Elizabeth Myers. She is the director of the Gannon Center Archives for Mundelein. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
I can't believe I called you ladies. Now, just what was the biggest challenge? And without, belaboring that, I mean, you were just saying what the biggest challenge in producing this history of Loyola University, Born in Chicago, was.
Well, time certainly, Lisa, was a constraint. This was a project begun in July of 2005, and I continued writing and researching from scratch for 2 years, and then in production for almost a year. But really, one of the fundamental obstacles was that the archives of Loyola University weren't established until the 1980s, and the college was founded in 1870. So we're talking about almost a century in which important documentation disappeared. So it's not that it's not organized; it's just it doesn't
gone.
exist.
Mm.
So
that seems odd
reconnecting
for a
the
university,
dots.
doesn't it?
Well, one of the interesting things about Loyola's story was that it was always a struggle for survival. And if you read what records do exist, there never was a golden age. There never was enough money. There never were enough students. And it was just a fight to keep in existence, much less think about how you were going to preserve the past.
Well, let's start with the history. I believe it was the first bishop appointed to the Illinois diocese, and at that time, I think you say in your book that it was the entire state of Illinois was the diocese.
It really was.
He didn't think much of Chicago.
The first Jesuit bishop, no, and it's an interesting story. I mean, he came. Bishop Vanderbilt came to Chicago and he couldn't wait to get out to warmer climes. But Arnold Damon comes in 1856, and it's a whole different story. Here is a man who's a native of Holland, who is an immigrant himself. He came, he thought he was going to be converting the Indians, and he gets to St. Louis and then finally Chicago. And it's this engagement with urban life that's such an important part of the Loyola story. Cities are good places. Cities are not bad places. Northwestern University, founded in Evanston, away from the evil influence of the city. It's a very different story for Loyola.
But the first Jesuit bishop one of the things that he didn't like was that apparently at that time St. Louis was much more refined culturally. Happening, and Chicago was much more still of a sort of a dusty...
A backwater, yeah.
Backwater.
But Arnold Damon comes in, and everything changes. Here is a man who is going to put the Catholic Church on the map, the Jesuits on the map, St. Ignatius College Prep on Roosevelt Road. That's the genesis of Loyola University, and it's a remarkable building right next to Holy Family Church. Built for the ages. It's here we are, we're here to stay, and we're going to build these places of beauty and art. And that has also been a defining characteristic of Loyola. But as Elizabeth's work at Mundelein also shows, here were working class Irish nuns putting their imprint on the urban landscape.
Well, that's something I'd like to get to. I guess we can get to it now, but I was sort of going to do a chronological thing here, but let's just back up just a little bit. The site of the first church and college was it Blue Island and
Blue Island Avenue at 12th Street, now Roosevelt Road.
Roosevelt Road. Now Father Damon located that site, located it there to serve immigrants, laborers, the middle class. Isn't that what the church is supposed to be about anyway? I mean, what makes that different?
Well, it always was. If you look at the distribution of churches in the 1850s, they were all clustered downtown.
In what is today the Cathedral District, correct?
Downtown near the Civic Center, what's now the Daily Plaza. And Damon really wanted to go out and build it and they'll come. And he did, and they did.
Now, but it was a very grand church. you have fabulous before and after photos. Apparently, it was very well preserved and or restored, and it survived the Great Chicago Fire. What's the story behind that? Didn't he make a pledge of some kind if it should survive the fire?
Well, it's a mythic pledge, absolutely. Father Damon was in Brooklyn, New York, conducting a mission. That's how they raised money for the college. And he heard that all Chicago was ablaze, and he got down on his knees and he prayed to Our Lady of Perpetual Help that, if the church and college survived, he would keep 7 lights burning in Holy Family Church, and they're still burning today. What I look at, Lisa, is the preferential option for the poor. What did it mean for poor people to build this place of beauty in their lives when reformers thought that, it was not a good expense of money? They should be building more reformatories and prisons.
Right, and that's the other thing I wanted. You mentioned in your book that the Chicago Tribune published a scathing editorial that while apparently it was a good idea for wealthy people to build big churches, that the poor should be concerned with more practical matters.
You got it exactly. And I call these the working class art institutes, for people built with their own nickels and dimes in working class neighborhoods. That's what the churches really were. And then if it was difficult to build a beautiful church, imagine how much more difficult it was to create a college with very few resources, no endowment. The Jesuits used to say they were the living endowment of Loyola University, and it was absolutely true well into the 1940s.
And they also had free schools initially.
Yes.
Free schools for boys, I'm sure.
Free schools for girls as well. And this was an amazing thing. Now, one of the things that I did in the book with Elizabeth's help was to look at the BVMs. In most narratives,
what's a BVM?
I'm sorry, the Sisters of Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Ah.
In most narratives, Mundelein College would not be mentioned till 1991 when it affiliated with Loyola University.
Right.
That's not true to the history. The BVMs came to Chicago in 1867, settled in Holy Family Parish, and were really responsible for the creation of this educational system, thousands of children enrolled in the schools. So we have worked the BVMs into every single chapter so that by the time they form Mundelein College in 1931, they've already created a network for Loyola University and also for themselves.